Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 911. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today is April 23rd, 2025.
All right, welcome to another episode of Anglican Unscripted. We are so glad you could be here as George and I are both coming off of Holy Week. I had like one or two things to do, and I'm completely zonked, brain fried. George probably had 4 dozen things to do. You during Holy Week run multiple services and keep up your regular schedule. That's why George is, well, I can't tape Tuesday, but I could certainly tape on Good Friday. Good Friday comes, oh, I can't tape on Good Friday. I guess I have 10 services today. And that's pretty typical for George, but I don't think we've ever done a Holy Week Anglican Unscripted in the history of our show. So I think people let us off, with a bit of a peace and grace, and we appreciate that. Have you recovered?
No. No, I haven't. I'm still wiped out, and it'll probably... I'm not as young as I once was, so I don't recover as quickly. Mm-hmm. And Easter Sunday, for instance, we had a sunrise service at 6:45 that began at 6:45, and I was so scared I would sleep through it because it was the first sunrise service we've had that I was up at 4 o'clock. And the last service I had was at a nursing home. So there were four services and a Bible study in between all that. Yeah. And and the thing is, some of the people came at 6:45 also came to the main service where we have music and the Easter egg hunt for the kids and everything. Mm-hmm. So I have different sermons. Each service is a different sermon. And so after a while, there's nothing left in here. Okay. And do you
know where you are right now? Okay. Do you know where you are?
I do. Right. I think I do. But leading a worship service is very intense. Well, for me it is. And some people it's dull and it's boring and this and that. But for me, I put my whole self, my whole being into it. And I did have something sort of to break. I had a young man pass out in the middle of the Easter at 10:30 service. And it wasn't in the sermon, so it wasn't he was slain by the Holy Spirit, but it was during the collection, so I think he's had a heart attack.
I did my taxes this week, I know.
But actually, and it was actually, I didn't know what to do because we're waiting for the ambulance to come and bring him away, and I don't want to start Holy Communion while he's still in the aisle. With half, like there are a dozen retired nurses lifting his feet, and we have a cardiologist in the congregation, and he is saying, well, if I get involved, I get liability, so I will tell the nurses what to do. So how long do you keep, tell the choir director, okay, another round. And actually I said, now friends, I think we'll just pass the plate one more time while we wait.
There you go. He gives us any stragglers and passing out, yes.
It's a young man, he had a sinus infection, and he stood up too quickly, or the thought of reaching into his pocket to put in a $10 bill was too much for him, and he passed out.
Well, Holy Week was also the time our taxes were due here in America, and you and I dutifully wait to the very last moment to finish our taxes.
Why we didn't pay them on Tuesday.
No.
That was a different... Crucifixion actually was on Tuesday last week, Kevin, not Friday, tax day.
Oh, man. I mean, in 2025... the Kallsen household, Jill, Kevin, and Sasquatch, paid more in federal taxes to Uncle Sam, Donald Trump, and everybody else about an hour north of here than I made in 1995. My annual income that year, or the family income that year. And that's just crazy. Now, inflation has a lot to do with it. It's all perspective. But I was in such a low tax bracket back then, George. It was nice. You know,
And you had children that you
3
could
kids.
for deduction.
Yeah, I had a mortgage. There's no mortgage anymore. I could write off daycare. My business was just starting off, so I had huge write-offs to the business. Those were the glory days, the early 1990s and 2000s for Kevin and I love filling out taxes because I was going to get a check back. Not so much anymore. I'm writing checks with how many digits? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digit checks.
Well, I screwed up on my withholding during the year.
Oh, no.
I have to file quarterly tax withholding.
Sure.
And so when I filled out the paperwork and I did the math and I did it twice to make sure I owed them $912, and I have now very strong opinions about government spending after having sent them $912 more.
It's like, yeah, I mean, people are freaking out of all the cutting they're trying to do here. Well, you know, we're $3 trillion in debt per year that we overspend, and you got to do something because I'm sick of paying more and more taxes. All right, we're 7 minutes in. We haven't even talked about the late Pope Francis. News Monday morning after Holy Week was that Pope Francis had a stroke that led to a heart attack and died. And the reaction around the world we'll talk about. Talk a little about the funeral happening Saturday, and maybe some of the conclave speculation. George, give us the quick story here.
Pope Francis passed away on Easter Monday from heart failure. His heart event. That was the autopsy report. And the process begins. The Vatican Chamberlain seals the apartments, and the College of Cardinals is called, and the funeral will be Saturday. And we've had the reactions. The official reactions from most of the Catholic press have been the Pope with the poor, the Pope with this and that. Conservatives have not been as kind. You and I talked before the show saying, you know, it really is bad form to criticize somebody immediately after their death. But at the same time, we have to have some candor and basically say what we believe. And so I have nothing that can be said about his moral, you know, whether he's in hell or heaven or wherever he's gone.
We're not allowed to do that. The Bible says do not judge somebody's salvation. Yeah.
But what I can do is say some people who aren't crazies, like Archbishop Chaput, the former Archbishop of Philadelphia, Catholic, said, you know, that Francis was a mixed person. He was temperamental and autocratic. He resisted criticism. He had a pattern of ambiguity and loose words that sowed confusion and conflict. In the face of deep cultural fractures on sexual behavior and identity, he condemned gender ideology, but downplayed the Christian theology of the body. He was neither hot nor cold. Some people expected him to run in with women clergy and gay blessings, and he would come up to the line and say the right things, but then pull back at the last moment. While conservatives would have heart failure. Now, for Anglicans, he was the best pope going in a long, long time.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you remember when...
that was our joke. He was a Episcopal wannabe. He was an Anglican wannabe. That was our joke, you know.
Greg Venables, at that time, the Anglican Bishop of Argentina, said, I know Jorge Bergoglio very well. He's a wonderful guy. He'll be great for Anglicans. And that panned out. Ecumenical relations with Anglicans blossomed. I was a beneficiary. They opened up the exorcism classes to non-Catholics. That's since been closed. Well, they're not closed it completely, but now you have to get a Catholic bishop's recommendation to go to this. And so unless you're a Catholic, you're not going to get a Catholic bishop to do that. But, you know, Francis opened it up so that all I needed to go was the backing of my bishop in Orlando and the permission of the Episcopal Church. Francis's big project, this synodality, has been criticized by Catholic traditionalists as being Anglicanism in disguise. So we as a denomination, and he had excellent relations with Justin Welby. Excellent relations with Justin Welby.
Buddies.
Now, The problem is that the failures that Welby had, in many ways, Francis had a lack of candor, ambiguity, saying one thing, doing another. I know Welby's sins more than I know Francis's sins, but Francis would say, I think the Vatican would every time Francis got on an airplane with journalists, they would hold their breath because that's when he would say stuff. So he was flying back from somewhere and he was asked about the homosexual issue, and he said, "Who am I to judge?"
Yeah.
You're the Pope.
Well, I think his most famous quote was, "All religions are path to God."
Yeah, he signed some document in Dubai or Qatar, one of these places, that basically equated the God of Islam with the God of Christianity, which is not true. And Islam doesn't believe in the Trinity.
No.
So it's one critic said Francis really did not work on theological lines. He was not a Pope Benedict, where his thinking was theologically driven. He was more a product of his upbringing in Argentina, where power politics.
And I think you really saw that because he was a disaster when it came to talking about economics. He would delve into economics a lot, and the stuff he said was absolute nonsense. When he would delve into those topics that he didn't know anything about, but he was raised in the culture of socialism. Where he was raised, that was capitalism was the enemy of everything, and so that's what he believed coming in as Pope.
And a lot like Welby, he had dreadful personnel choices. Francis surrounded himself with some really questionable people. And when some of them got caught up in the sexual abuse scandals, Francis either protected them or excused them or didn't do anything. In many ways, the sins that Justin Welby did over the John Smythe and that whole the abuse cover-up, you could lay that at the feet of Pope Francis as well. Some would say even more strong.
There was no safeguarding at the Vatican. No. Yeah, absolutely not. All right, so go ahead.
Again, I'm uncomfortable because the man's just died, and it'll take a long time to actually see did he truly change the course of the church? Are we going to get somebody who's Francis II, or are we going to get a counter-revolution? Are we going to get a Donald Trump to a Joe Biden here, undoing everything Francis did?
Well, and here comes the discussion of who are the favorites. Now, we have to be very careful when we talk about who are the favorites, because this is a conclave, and seldom do the favorites ever win. Okay,
and none of them have. None of them, like some Anglican primates, have us on speed dial and tell us from the men's room what's going on.
Yeah, we don't have it inside. Now, John Paul II, not a favorite. Nobody knew who he was going into the conclave. Came out, he was Pope. Benedict was a favorite. Benedict was singled out before the conclave formed, and he came out as the victor. In the same way, nobody knew who this Pope Francis guy was, but came out of the conclave. So we know that there's some half the favorites are Pope Francis-like as far as their ideology, and the other half is the opposite pendulum, conservatives, the John Pauls, the Benedicts. But I don't know enough about who they are to say who's favorited. I could do a quick what's that betting site we go to here? I could pull it up here. Pietro Parino of Italy. He's 70. He's the Vatican's Secretary of State since 2013. He has the best odds at plus 150. Louis Tengel, he's Filipino, 67, has even odds. He's the former bishop of Melilla, and he's known for his progressive views and pastoral experience. And then Patty's betting site lists about 4 or 5 other people I've never heard of. So, don't know, George. Yeah.
Well, it is important because this is not new, but over the last generation, we've entered a phase where you and I have more in common with traditionalist Roman Catholics than we do with liberal Anglicans.
Sure.
And we're seeing, except for certain ecclesiological, church order issues and 1 or 2 theological issues.
I can cite the 39 articles. Yes. Okay. Absolutely.
They're becoming less and less important, denominational identity. And so Benedict was really good for conservative Anglicans. Do you remember when he was Cardinal Ratzinger at the time. He sent a letter of support to the meeting of American Episcopalians in Plano before everything fell apart after the Gene Robinson election. Those things mattered, and it gives strength and comfort and sort of a sense that though we may disagree on some issues which are important, place of Mary and things like that, when it comes down to issues of morality, what we believe is right and wrong, we're closer to traditional Catholics than we are to liberal Anglicans. And to have an ally, if you will, just strengthens our resolve and our vigor and our ability to stand for truth and the Lord.
Up until 5, maybe 6 years ago, a goal of an Anglican bishop around the world was to have an audience with the Pope, to get to meet him, to have that. We're on the same team, but I would say Pope Francis's statements and convictions have led that desire to fade away, where less and less traditional Orthodox Anglicans have gone to the Vatican to meet the Pope.
You can see this. We've published the primate's statements on the death of Francis, and you can see some very effusive ones from liberal Anglicans saying this guy is, a light to the nations and all, down to the Archbishop of Sydney having a 2-line saying, "Oh, we pray for the repose of his soul." No, they don't do that in Sydney, but we, pray for his. But my point is that you can see in the language of the press statements put out, there was a mixed Anglican view. Now, there were some Africans who just, hey, it's fun. I got to meet the Pope. Isn't this neat? And their responses were along those lines. But it really was a mixed bag that we saw out there.
Yeah.
Not everybody is jumping up and down saying, "Oh, a giant is dead." Some are, but nobody is as vulgar as we are saying bad things. But
well, no, I've seen the Roman Catholic commentary and some of the curmudgeons that are out there, and we have to be honest in reporting. People show up to Anglican Unscripted because we're going to be honest. Even though it's uncomfortable, even though we're offensive sometimes, at least we're honest, with our own opinion and convictions. Let's move on. Enough Pope Francis. Pray for the conclave. Pray that God would have his way again with the Roman Catholic Church. Let's move on. Trivia question out there. Some of you guys know this. What is the only rated R Christian film? You're right. The Passion. It is. Crazy. I know. Well, I'm sure Christians have made more rated R ones, but this is based on the Passion of Christ, based on the up to the crucifixion. Don't tell me that's Justin. No. And so we have heard from Mel Gibson that they're starting to film the next Passion of the Christ. It's called The Resurrection. That's the good part of the story, George.
Passion of Christ,
Yeah.
the resurrection.
Cool.
Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus in the original 22 years ago, has been recast as Jesus Christ, and they're going to use some computer-aided animation to de-age him, they say. He's an handsome man. He's in good shape, but still there's a difference between someone in their 30s and someone in their 50s.
What are you talking about?
Okay.
All right. There's no gray hair on your body. Look at that. It's just looking like, okay. I have aged more than George, but go ahead. Go ahead. I interrupted.
The filming starts in Rome this summer, and Mel Gibson has been doing some. Now, actually, it was my wife who informed me about this because her little news magazines and things were speaking about this more than my churchy stuff. Mel Gibson's approach is, he says it's going to be almost like an acid trip. It's going to really, just as the first film was, I didn't like it when I first saw it.
Brutal. It was very brutal. Yeah.
I didn't take the kids from Sunday school. I eventually watched it. Not in the movie theater, but I watched it at home, and I had to stop it a few times because I'm not someone who enjoys that. But that was deliberate on Gibson's part to make the point about the suffering of Christ. And he's going to be using that same sort of extraordinary, it's not going to be violence this time around, but I really am interested to see what he's going to be doing. But what sort of psychedelic type thing is he going to...
Well, I mean, that's a good question because we know from the readings after the resurrection that his countenance was different, that he was not recognized by Mary, by people who ran to the tomb. He was not recognized walking the road to Emmaus. He was not, I mean, so how is Mel going to address that?
Won 3 Oscars. It cost $37 million to make and made over $400 million in its first release. And I expect this one, Jim Caviezel is a good actor. Gibson's a fantastic director.
Sure.
I expect this is going to be I think it'll come out in 2027 or Christmas 2026.
It'll be good. I mean, I could not watch, you and I talked in the pre-show, I could not really watch The Passion of the Christ because it knowing the whole story, and it just wasn't an enjoyable thing for me to watch. You know,
and it strikes me, like just as a pause aside about the state of the movie business, they can spend hundreds of millions of dollars making these Snow White fiascos and things like that. In the latest Indiana Jones, the Star Wars, and Mel Gibson with an independent production can get $10 times the return on his investment, get a film that people will watch and will be watching for a long, long time, 100 years from now.
Sure.
The movie business, the studio business is dead. Yeah. Movie making is still going on, but the studios in Hollywood are dead.
Well, it costs too much to make it there. They'll go anywhere except Hollywood to make a movie. I was watching an interview with somebody Tom Hanks had worked with in the past who said to make a movie in Hollywood is hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. To fly people to Ireland to make the movie, a fraction of that, a small fraction, to take them anywhere else in the world to make a movie other than Hollywood because of the union laws, the taxes from California, it just makes it impossible financially to make a movie there. And that makes the studios dead. Unless you start a studio somewhere in Israel. Let's move on to, Israel's next in our news, George. Israel has bombed an Anglican hospital in Gaza. And as far as I know, they probably killed the next pope there. Whenever there is a bombing in Gaza or Israel striking something, the PR for Hamas is amazing in the stories they tell us, George.
The moral of this story is don't believe anything you hear for at least a week.
Yeah.
Israel attacked the Anglican hospital in Gaza. And after the attack, the Diocese of Jerusalem put out this statement announcing its horror, it's a humanitarian crisis, genocide, this and that. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, put out a statement, totally one-sided, this or that. Church of England bishops followed a few days later. Sean Rowe and Steve Woods, the TEC and the ACNA archbishops, had some really balanced statements, blame on both sides. And finally, the truth has now come out. Hamas has a headquarters underneath the Anglican hospital.
I would say had.
And Israel said to the hospital, you got so many hours to evacuate because we're going to destroy Hamas's facilities. Now, Hamas uses all the hospitals in Gaza
and schools
schools and places and mosques, places that Israel would not attack because they're not military targets. Everything, and that's part of Hamas. Hamas does this stuff. So Israel is giving a warning to the people who are being used as human shields by Hamas to get out, because we're now going to destroy the Hamas bunker underneath the hospital. Now, in a perfect world, would we have Hamas doing this? No. Would Israel need to strike a hospital? No. But this is when you're dealing with the cancer that is Hamas, you've got to cut it out. End it.
You do. I mean, we've discussed this before. Well, why do they allow them to have their headquarters? Well, they're going to kill them if they protest. They get to have their headquarters, their missiles, their rocket sites under the schools and under the hospitals because they are terrorists and they threaten to kill anybody who exposes this. And it's sad.
We had some news reports of protests by Gazans against Hamas a few weeks ago. And all those protest leaders, it's been now reported, have been arrested by Hamas's police and disappeared. Yeah. Hamas is a terror regime, and you cannot equate the two sides. Yeah. So, friends, the point of this moral of the story isn't that, oh, woe is me, a hospital was bombed, but gosh, it's terrible that this war is continuing, but you cannot believe any story put out by the Diocese of Jerusalem. I can go back, this is not new, this is going back 25 years of the Diocese of Jerusalem basically repeating first PLO, now Hamas propaganda.
Yeah, Arafat loved him. All right, let's move on to some other news here. If you haven't been paying attention to the news, you are not stressed. You live a righteous life. You're not freaked out by the pendulum of left-right news happening all over the world. If you have been watching the news, you know that Trump is addressing the illegal immigration problem we have in America and trying to, through ICE and other departments in the interior here in America, expel them to their home countries. And in doing so, some people who don't mind having an open border and are a little bit more liberal with their ideas of what an American citizen is and should be are protesting this. And they are able to do this in America because we have a balanced government. We have executive and judicial and legislative. And no one person is truly in charge at any one time, in theory. If you don't like what Trump's doing, you can go to a federal court and have a federal judge issue an injunction to stop it temporarily until both sides can speak their piece about what's going on. And the Episcopal churches and some other liberal churches were like, we're not happy with what's happening, but if a person shows up in church, they can claim sanctuary. If they're at a church service, if they show up for the homeless meal plan, if they're in the property of our churches, they are able to cry sanctuary, and ICE and Donald Trump, that mean orange guy, cannot do anything about it. Their property and safety and security is in the church. And it's been safe to go to the courts, George. The federal courts have basically for the last 10 days shut down major operations of Trump's desire to return people to their birth country. However, I'm reading here in the news, one organization has lost to Trump. It's the Episcopal Church.
I don't know how they did it, but the Episcopal Church and the other liberal churches who filed a lawsuit, they lost. Mm-hmm. As you say, Kevin, a lot of injunctions have been filed by liberal. It's called lawfare in the United States, yeah. where using the courts, and the argument is that these courts, a district judge has jurisdiction only in a district, but they're issuing national injunctions. And the Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether a judge in Topeka can issue a ruling that affects everybody everywhere. Well, this particular issue is the Biden administration had announced that they would no longer send ICE agents into churches. That's church property. So the public perception of this rule, and that if you watch the mainstream media, would be that ICE would not break into the middle of a Eucharist service and haul off people. Well, yes, plus they wouldn't go into a church homeless shelter, into a food kitchen, into a church-owned property. So a summer camp that is being used to house illegal aliens, that was off limits under the Biden administration. Well, since the Biden administration didn't do anything with illegal immigrants, it wasn't a big deal. Yeah. The Trump administration rescinded that internal guideline. It wasn't a law, it was a guideline. And once it was rescinded, a coalition of liberal groups, liberal Jewish groups, Christian groups, including the Episcopal Church, filed suit. And they, to their shock, horror, and dismay, lost in federal court. Now, they can appeal that, but it's very unlikely that they're going to go anywhere with that. But it's sort of funny that the one of the few bright spots in this lawsuit stuff is handing the head of the Episcopal Church to it. But,
it's minor because you don't see ICE striking people out of churches, but I was surprised to see somebody actually lost to the federal system. All right, let's move over, and here's another loss. It's not just the Episcopal Church losing. The Church of England, in very real terms, has lost a big one. The UK, United Kingdom's Supreme Court, ruled there is now a definition for women. Women in biological terms. If you are a woman, you are always identified as a woman. If you are a trans woman, you are still a man. If you're a trans man, you are still a woman. Did I get that right? Trans women are men and trans men are women. Yeah, the trans part, sorry. I was not born for this type of reality. Sorry, George. And so the Supreme Court has said, basically, you can't pretend anymore. You can't.
Biology is reality.
Yeah,
biology is reality.
Science is real. And so this is hard, though, because the Church of England said, has been playing kind of hanky-panky with this trans rule and allowing same-sex marriages to occur in a trans-officiated way.
Maybe not a trans-officiated way, but in trans participants' way.
There you go. Perfect.
You could get what was called a gender recognition certificate from the government, which if you were a man, that you could now say that you were a woman. If you were a woman, you could now be a man with a piece of paper.
Right.
And the Church of England was accepting these so that a couple who wished to marry, say two men, but one of them had a gender recognition certificate, could get married in the Church of England. And that would not be considered a same-sex marriage because the gender recognition certificate changed you from a man to a woman. Now the British government is saying, well, you're still a man. You have a piece of paper, but it doesn't mean anything. Now, so what's happened is that the Church of England, because they didn't think about this theologically, they just jumped on the transgender bandwagon. They punished clergy who called transgender clergy, there's a archdeacon of Manchester named Rachel Mann, Mann, who really is a man. And Brett Murphy got in trouble with his diocese for pointing out this fact. And he actually was cleared by a church court, but he had to go through all this for transphobia and this and that. Now the UK Supreme Court said Brett's been right all along. But here's the thing, the Church of England, through their school guidance on how to deal with trans children and everything, accept them and this and that because they really are women now, they really are girls now, or they really are boys now. By living and dying on the spirit of the age, the Church of England has found itself once again looking ridiculous. That they who say, well, they really are women because they have a piece of paper, now have to admit, well, they're really not women because that Supreme Court has said the piece of paper is worthless as far as that goes.
Yeah. It's surprising to watch in 2025 that we have to be so clear now about items of what is a man and what is a woman. And I would hope other courts around the country, around the world would do this. Clearly, we have to address this at the Supreme Court level here in America because of all the trans stuff that they're doing in schools. And a recent study says 1 in 27 kids under 18 now identify themselves as trans. And the statistic is just off the chart of something that didn't even exist in any shape or form in the late 1970s and just slowly took on to the point now where you are only special in some education environments if you are trans. And that's you have a better friend group if you're trans, and it's just this cult of recognition. And it is the clearest, most evil zeitgeist of any age that I can think of. So
it's mental illness.
Yeah,
it's mental illness.
Absolutely.
And what is sick is, the Episcopal Church at a recent General Convention affirmed a child's right to choose its sex. Mm-hmm. That's madness. That's nonsense. And it's evil. I mean, I can see why these doctors and pharmaceutical companies are all into this because they make a fortune out of mutilating and castrating children and removing children, teenage girls' breasts and everything. And they're ideologically driven and profit driven. But the stupid people in the Church of England and the Episcopal Church and other denominations, it's not just Anglicans are crazy. The evil that has just been accepted as normal is just so frightening these days.
We have arrived at an age where we medicate identity. That is just so foreign to me, and because it's so evil. It just, but let's move on. But hold on. J.K. Rowling was out smoking a cigar and drinking a brandy because she's been fighting this the whole time. And she's probably the greatest fiction writer in the UK history. So, yeah.
Well, she's no political conservative either.
No.
No. It was just a victory for common sense.
Yeah. So, Anglican Mainstream has been deplatformed by GoDaddy. Now, let me help you out here. Every website you go to is hosted on a server somewhere. Anglican Unscripted, Anglican Inc., Anglican TV is all hosted by Microsoft Azure servers out of Utah. I rent server space there, and that's how you see. Every time you log on to Anglican Inc., you're hopping onto a server over in Utah. That's how it works. GoDaddy owns their servers. They have a server farm, 3 or 4 server farms here in America, and it's their responsibility to make sure that the websites on their servers hold to their policy, and their policy is published on their website. For some reason, Anglican Mainstream has been deplatformed by GoDaddy and their multiple service farms but nobody knows why, George.
Yeah, evidently an anonymous complaint was made alleging some sort of copyright violation, but they wouldn't say what, they wouldn't say when, they wouldn't say why. Then GoDaddy pulled the whole thing, and Anglican Mainstream lost a lot of its content because it didn't have it archived on another spot.
That's their fault. Always back up your stuff.
Well, but basically this was a vexatious complaint.
Sure.
To take down Anglican Mainstream, and GoDaddy participated in the short-term destruction of a very popular, very important source of Anglican news and opinion in England.
Well, GoDaddy went an extra step here. They blocked access to the account, so they couldn't take down the archive and couldn't take down a backup of it. And so, they lost all their back data because they were locked out of the platform. They weren't just, at any one time, a person can turn that server off so it doesn't have access to the internet, but you can still log into the back end and get your stuff out. They won't let them do that. That's crazy.
So, I mean, is that normal?
No, not at all. So, but GoDaddy, has to deal with, I'm sure they have a department that deals with some pretty nasty stuff. And Anglican Mainstream's not one of the nasty things. But if you have people, running a platform to print off plastic guns or something, they wouldn't want you to be able to log on and reset up somewhere else. So I don't know.
Well, what's the answer for somebody like GoDaddy, for Anglican Mainstream?
Always back up your data. Always have a complete backup. We do with Anglican, with all our stuff we have, it's backed up on a huge Synology drive held at a church in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. So, yeah, always back up. Important lesson from IT pro Kevin Kallsen. King Charles gave an Easter message for the United Kingdom, and certain previous commentators on Anglican Unscripted were not pleased. Let's talk about that, George.
Well, Gavin Ashenden has basically found the sweet spot in English culture of being the Catholic curmudgeon for TV.
He's wonderful.
Yes. And King Charles has been providing him plenty of ammunition. King Charles gave an Easter message as his mother would, and whereas his mother, Queen Elizabeth's Easter messages would be about the Christian faith and the uniqueness of Christ, King Charles gave a very weak, he gave the sort of pablum that a politician would give.
All religions are a path to heaven, yes.
And in fact, he mentioned Judaism and Islam in his Easter message. And it really was a waste of time. It didn't speak to the uniqueness of Christ. It wasn't an Easter message. It was, I'm Charles, I'm still here, pay attention to me. And Gavin just took King Charles apart in articles and some TV appearances for basically failing in his duty as protector of the Church of England. What was Charles thinking? And we shouldn't really be surprised, because Charles long ago, wanted to change his title from Defender of the Faith to the Defender of Faith, meaning all faiths. You could believe whatever you wanted, he would defend that, rather than the Christian faith. And we're seeing this worked out. Charles hasn't changed.
Well, he is not the defender of the Christian faith. When speaking of the fast of Ramadan and other things he's done publicly, he's never referenced Christianity. He only references other religions when speaking of Christianity. He never does the contrast to that. Now, the biggest problem Charles has is his mom was so open about her faith. When you watched her Christmas message or your Easter message, she wasn't just expressing the Christian faith, she was expressing herself in the Christian faith. And it was just marvelous to watch her personal expression of her faith, and that she used television and radio to do that. No monarch has done it so vibrantly before or after. And I would hope and pray that King Charles would discover the faith as his mom had. Let's see here. Bad news, and we do this every year. Muslims have killed 53 Nigerian Christians in one village on Palm Sunday. You and I, for almost every year of this program, have talked about Islamic violence in African countries. And it usually happens over the holidays.
Happens all the time, and such that it's not even news anymore. It's commonplace. Some Fulani tribesmen, Muslims, on motorbikes and in Toyota Hilux pickup trucks, charged into a village in the plateau state of Nigeria, which is in the border between North and South, and opened fire, killing the men, raping the women, burning down buildings, killing anybody they could. And 53 Christians were murdered. This was Palm Sunday in one little village. Now, we can say, oh, yes, there's socioeconomic factors where the Fulani are pastoral herders, they're cattle herders, and they move from place to place, while the Christians are settled farmers, and they clash because the cows eat up the crops and trample them. Yeah, that's all true. We've seen John Wayne movies between farmers and ranchers fighting. But this is a religious war. The extremist Muslims in Africa, in the Congo, in Chad, in all these different places, in Kenya, are seeking to kill Christians simply because they are Christians. Mm-hmm. And the Nigerian government doesn't do anything. And you ask yourself, well, how is it that Muslim Fulani have guns? Guns are expensive. I mean, yes, they probably came when Gaddafi's armories were emptied out.
That was probably, yes.
But at the same time, you still need money to buy ammunition. Mm-hmm. And where's this money coming from? And because the Christian farmers, they don't have AK-47s and rounds of ammunition to protect themselves. And they're just as poor as the Fulani tribesmen. Somebody is paying for this to take place. Who is doing this? Some say it's Muslim leaders in the Nigerian military, the government. And they say, well, why would they want to have instability? Because then they could declare martial law and take over again. If things get so bad, people will clamor for the army to return to power. That's speculation, but
that's what we do.
It's an evil situation in Nigeria, and we need to pray for all people there that they be saved from the violence.
Next story. If you believe polls and polling questions in the UK, there is a revival going on, George. There's a
Catholic revival.
Yeah. I don't see the churches full, but I see a lot of newsprint on it, George.
Well, there's anecdotal evidence in some places that Generation Z, specifically young men, are flocking to Catholic churches mostly of a traditional mindset. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not really reflected yet in attendance figures. And this has led to extrapolations saying that if this continues, there are going to be more Catholics than Anglicans in England, first time since Henry VIII. Could be, I don't know. But this is, you can't make hard decisions on this sort of polling stuff. But there are some explanations that are making sense as to why this might be happening. David Roseberry, former rector, Christ Church Plano, very influential ACNA leader, had an article out the other day saying that he sees this as the Catholic Church will stand for something. And young men in this culture where being a man is bad, being white is bad, being working class is bad, all these things, they've found a safe harbor in traditional Catholicism, which is not offered them by the Church of England or other Protestant denominations in England.
I think of all the mainline denominations, the Roman Catholic Church has remained patriarchal. They still have the patriarchy. They still have men in control of so many different things. And I think that's appealing to Gen Z 17 to 25-year-olds who've been brought up in the West here, understanding that they are the oppressor, that they are the reason everything is wrong with the world. They are the reason there's climate change. They're the reason that there's economic chaos. They're the reason that UK... I had an ant on me. I'm a camper. Of course I did. The Brits colonized the world. They're the reason for imperialism. They're the reason for everything bad in the world. And all of a sudden, you hear that enough, you're looking for, well, is there another answer out there for me being white?
Now, Orthodoxy is not that big in England, so perhaps if Orthodoxy had a bigger footprint, we would be seeing this happen in Orthodox churches. Sure. And in the United States, we're seeing that sort of anecdotal information about the rise of young people entering Orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. But you're also seeing that in the United States of people, what they call on the Canterbury Trail, people sure. leaving non-denominational churches and winding up in the Anglican world because they want the structure, they want the traditions, they want the certainty that a liturgical church has. Now, the Church of England is a liturgical church, but its doctrines and morals are all over the place. Now, you could find individual churches that are very, strong, but as a denomination, they're very, very badly off right now because of such poor leadership over the past
and that's it. There's a void. When you lead a vacuum and you leave a void in your church, nobody wants to look towards you for answers. And you're not being sought out for the spiritual answers of very lost 18 to 22-year-olds, 25-year-olds. And if the Roman Catholic Church is providing this should be an example of why the Anglican Communion needs to be that voice again and to fill the void left by the empty See of Canterbury. So, all right, every holiday, Christmas, Easter, Merry Christian Holiday, CNN, USA Today, New York Times, Washington Post puts out a story telling us that Mary wasn't a virgin, or that Jesus really didn't die, or the tomb wasn't really empty, or the Romans were paid off by the disciples so that Jesus' story would continue and he would not have to be persecuted. Of all places to find a hoax story, I was not expecting it to be from Christianity Today, which posted a story saying that Jesus probably was not hung by nails, but rather rope. And to their benefit, when Thomas says, "Show me your rope burns, or I won't believe," I'm like, well, okay, finally Christianity Today has put that together for us, George. Crazy.
Christianity Today, well, they haven't published me in about 10, 15 years. Yeah. They've had an editorial move to the left, Christian left. It's been going on about 10, 15 years now, and they would drop contributors like me completely, wouldn't touch me with a 10-foot pole. Whereas in the past, my articles, they'd pick up all the time.
Yeah.
And this shift has also come with an editorial policy. They were very virulently anti-Donald Trump. And at the last election, white Christian evangelicals went for 83% for Donald Trump, according to the polls. So they're in that 17% of white evangelicals who didn't go for Trump. They have basically, chosen the minority side in the evangelical world. And their choices of stories. Now, a silly reporter can write a dumb article, and I've written plenty of dumb articles, and you can fix them. But it's the editors who decide, over Easter, we should push a story that challenges the received narrative of the crucifixion, that Jesus did not have his hands and feet pierced by nails, but was, he was a character in the movie Spartacus, where Kirk Douglas is strapped up onto a cross with the ropes. That's really what happened to Jesus. Well, as you point out, Kevin, the Gospel of John sort of makes that a bit problematic, as does the Book of Acts.
Yeah.
As you say, Jesus said, Thomas didn't say, unless I see his rope burns, but I see, holes in his hands and feet, I won't believe. So what this message tells us is that things that we would once trusted, even Christianity Today was founded by Billy Graham and Company.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's so far from where Billy Graham once was. Institutions like the Wall Street Journal used to be conservative. Now it's very
not in my lifetime. I don't remember 60s, 50s.
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, the National Review used to be considered a stalwart of the conservative movement, and it has.
It's very anti-Trump, yeah. Very anti-economy.
What you're saying is, don't put your trust in institutions. Put your trust in Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Think for yourself. Yeah. Don't let. In other words, these institutions get captured, just like the university's been captured, the Episcopal Church has been captured, the military has been captured by the woke ideologues. One of the things we're seeing right now are all these high-ranking officers being tossed out of the military because of their direct insubordination. I refuse to put up a picture of Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth in my headquarters because I don't recognize them as the leaders of this army. Well, unfortunately, Colonel, you don't get to choose who's the head of the army, and out you go. Yeah. But just to think that we have an army where army officers are making political statements like that, it would have been unheard of a generation ago.
Yeah, I mean, the times are strange change. Yeah, the times are changing, and it's very strange. Absolutely. And stick to Anglican Unscripted. We'll try to keep you updated on the changes within the church. And as we seek out a new pope for the Roman Catholics, keep watching us here. We'll talk all about it. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger. You've been watching episode 911 of Anglican Unscripted.